Welcome everyone to the Co-Creators Convergence Thursday night Creator Convos. I'm Noelle Marshall and I'm here with my beloved.
Hi everyone, I'm Bob Warner. So glad to have Rita bring yet another amazing person, Gary, to our circle this evening. Thank you so much.
So welcome everyone, and we're going to get started here in just a moment. I see there's some folks here who haven't been on our calls before. So what I'd like to do is show you briefly a little video that tells you something about the Co-Creators Convergence. So hold on. That's a little bit about the Co-Creators Convergence. And that was one of the best questions that Barbara Marx Hubbard ever asked. What is your gift to the shift of humanity? And so tonight we have a wonderful guest. Well, we actually have two guests. Our friend Rita Marsh from the Center for Human Flourishing. And we met her through Unity Earth. And we're coming up on World Unity Week together that we'll be celebrating. So Rita, welcome. And I know you have brought us another wonderful guest, Gary Springfield, with a very provocative title, Christ is Not a Person. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Rita, and then we'll learn more about Gary. And we're just asking folks to keep your video and stay muted. And there will be a time, I think Gary is going to be doing a meditation towards the end of his hour, and then we're going to open it up for questions and comments for the final half hour. So there'll be plenty of time to interact with Rita and our guests. So I want to thank you all for coming and really looking forward to this conversation. So Rita, over to you.
Thanks so much, Noelle and Bob, for this opportunity to introduce you to an amazing person, Gary Springfield. I'm Rita Marsh. I'm here in Carbondale, Colorado at the Center for Human Flourishing. Our organization brings programs in integral health to our community, mostly in person at the 3rd Street Center here in Carbondale, and sometimes zooming out into the world, and more so, of course, since we've had the pandemic to deal with. And so I'm really pleased that we could do this with you this evening and bring Gary to the larger community of the co-creative convergence. I met Gary through his friend and student, Lisa McKenzie, who for 14 years or more has been steeping in Gary's work and teaching the Golden Light meditation that has been central to his teachings. Gary's a meditation teacher, a mystic, a sage, and as of January 2022, he's a published author of this book, Source Dialogues. Wonderful energy in this book. Source Dialogues, The Miracle Mechanism of Manifestation is the full title of the book. A little bit about Gary. His spiritual journey began as a sophomore in college when a friend gave him a book about Edgar Cayce, the great prophet and mystic. Reading that book opened Gary's door to understanding that there is another reality besides the life of struggle that most people experienced. And this experience was reinforced shortly thereafter when three leather-bound books titled Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East mysteriously fell off a bookstore shelf onto the floor in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
His soul's journey carried him to Carmel, California, where he met Dory D'Angelo, the angel lady of Carmel, who became his main teacher for the year before she left the planet. I've come to know that Gary's discipline of meditation and devout spiritual practice quickly opened the doorway into realms of spirit and began to teach others to create the sacred relationship with the soul. And you can learn more about Gary's background on his website, which is garyspringfield.com. Well, the conversation this evening is about his book, Source Dialogues. And the title of the presentation is Christ is Not a Person. Rather, Christ is the creative mechanism of manifestation. And I truly believe that Gary has a gift and that Barbara Marx has welcomed him into this circle. He has a gift to the shift in humanity. So we're going to have a pause while Noelle plays a transformance for us, and then I'll invite Gary to share.
As we open this virtual space, let's connect and be present with each other. Let's get to know each other with kindness and gentleness. Let's listen to each other with generosity in our hearts. Let's learn from each other with curiosity and wonder. We are a part of nature. We are a part of Earth. We are a part of life. May we use our time together to add to peace and truth and goodness in the world.
a big thank you to Gary Malcolm and Sarah McCrum for that beautiful transformation that was part of World Unity Week last year, and will also be part of the World Unity Week in June this year. So Gary, welcome.
Hello, my friends. Nice to be here with all of you. Thank you very much.
So I'm just going to let you unfold the story of this book, which
Okay, thank you
holds
very much.
such beautiful light and promise for humanity.
After I read the book about Edgar Cayce, all through college, I read extensively about the spiritual, the metaphysical, and just really gave my whole life over to that. And then in 1976, I began a very devout spiritual practice of meditation. And I still meditate today 2 or 3 times, 2 or 3 hours a day. And it opened up, of course, many avenues of perception and awareness. It was in the beginning about golden light, which is the mystical marriage of the masculine, the feminine. Golden light's the frequency of the soul. The soul is the perfection of the divine self. And as we allow ourselves to interface with golden light, it literally begins to, from inside out, begins to refine the body, refine consciousness. And moreover, the soul then actually begins to enter into the body, and we begin to create light activation. And then in 2015, a friend of mine gave me a call and said he had just met a woman that was quite profound in her knowledge. And she told him that there was a gentleman that he knew that he was to work with to bring out a special book on the planet. And so I met her in 2015, and her name is Sandra Sneed, and she is able to interface with an individual soul and bring forth information from that soul about who they are, what they planned and what they brought into creation actually before they were born into this physical dimension. And so it was like a remembrance, if you will, of everything that I was pre-programmed with before I came here. And it was about literally learning more about the Christ as not a person, but about the creative mechanism of the universe. So if you can imagine, in the very beginning of creation, there was just the void. And in the void, a field of pure consciousness, and source in the void simply dreaming. So imagine yourself in a very dark room. There's absolutely no light in the room, but you're there and you begin to dream and you begin to imagine, and it goes on for somewhat of an eternity, but there's no physical form, there's no manifestation. It's just the constant dreaming, the imagination. And in that, finally, source within the void asked itself the question, what am I? And in that moment of the question, there was light. And that is the light of the Christ. It is the light that is able to view, if you will, what is within the void, within source. And as it ignites it into light by simply bringing light to it, it creates a reflection off of it out of the void into manifestation. And so creation actually began from the Christ field. Now, when we talk about the Christ, it is a crystalline structure that is prismatic. And so that is really where the word Christ comes from, a crystalline prism. So crystalline Christ, Christ prism. And it is then a crystalline prism of light geometry that we call the star tetrahedron. And as it then is able to create the balance of masculine power and feminine love, it then literally creates consciousness to become unified once again. And so a human being is no longer, if you will, within the masculine dimension of doing, power, action, or only within the feminine of feeling, love, and imagination, the two become unified, which then creates the mystical marriage within. And as that takes place, it begins to create a light geometry around, within, and through an individual that is the star tetrahedron. But more importantly, as the star tetrahedron is then turning, it then opens a vortex, an interdimensional doorway right within the center of the heart chakra, which in India we call the jewel in the lotus. But the jewel in the lotus is a doorway back into the void. And so one then can, with that open doorway, esoterically be able to peer back into the void, where all things within the mind of Source and all of its creative potential and all of its dreaming and imagination still exist, waiting to come forth into manifestation. And so the star tetrahedron being the Christ prism, the Christ field, it is able with the light of the Christ mind to look back through the void inside of oneself, imagine and feel the choices of consciousness that one create, the perceptions. And as one is then esoterically bringing light to it interiorly, it creates a reflection off of it. It then moves through the crystalline structure of the star tetrahedron, this prismatic form. It spins it out into holographic reality, and then the spirit emerging from out of the void from within gives it life. And so this is why the Christ field is the creative mechanism of manifestation. All manifestation of all creation emerged originally from out of the Christ field, which is simply the light that was able, through the knowing of what I am, void asking the question, what am I? To once again, with that light now peer into the void and begin creation. And then as creation then began to unfold, it was then that we then came forth as the human field. And we then, with free will, had the right to then begin to learn about masculine. We began to learn about feminine emotion, feeling, and we became somewhat separate and lost within this dimension. But now is the time on the planet where we're beginning to weave all of those disparate things back together. And we realize that true masculine power is simply the focusing of attention and light. It's not thinking, it's not doing, it's simply holding the mind steady and focused, just like the light at a projector on a film. And when we shine the bright light through film, it then creates it upon the screen. Well, the film within a human being is imagination, the feminine principle. And so as we hold the light steady, imagine and feel within the void the choices of creation that we would bring forth. They are now illuminated. And as they are illuminated, they then arise forth and touch the prismatic form. The star tetrahedron then holographically creates it around us, and then light finally precipitates into physical form. And so we're creating no longer by doing, but by being. And so the next wave of evolution is then the fulfillment of the Christ field within an individual. They have balanced the masculine power, the feminine of emotion and feeling. And when power and love begin to be unified in together, it then creates this movement, this light activation of the Christ field around an individual. So a person then becomes the master of the Christ field. Just as in the origin, the original, there was a Christ field that began creation. And we are then a subset of that same Christ field, but then individualized. But now with the ability to look back into the void and become co-creators within and through Source in simultaneous with all that is. And as we are then able to esoterically look into the void and create our choices of manifestation, you see, in the future, there will no longer be food shortages. There will no longer be problems with minerals, problems with fuel, problems with oil, because we'll move into the place of manifestation. All things already exist within the mind of Source, God, so to speak. They are simply waiting to be illuminated. And so this is why the being, who we know as Yeshua or Jesus, mastered the Christ field. And as he was able to master the Christ field, he could then imagine within the void loaf and fish. He didn't have to think about it. He didn't have to try and make it or do it. As he simply illuminated it within the void, it created a reflection off of it, and then life precipitated light around it, and it became manifest. So everything in life is simply mind or consciousness. Mind consciousness through the Christ field was able to create light into a denser form through the Christ field. And as light became dense and slowed down in vibration, light became actual all creation and form. And so everything is at its core light and consciousness. And it is the mind of higher mind that then is able to create light through the Christ field to be manifest. And so this is the new wave of evolution that's occurring. So the book is about then learning how to create this, what we call ascension in consciousness, ascension into light activation, by not leaving the body. Ascension is not about leaving the body. It's about creating that which is the Christ field around and through, and we move to light activation within form. And so we evolve from human into the human divine state, which is the next wave of evolution. And because it is the next wave of evolution, this is why the old paradigm is crumbling. It is based upon masculine manipulation and control and programs. And there's nothing wrong with those as we grew up within the Piscean age within those programs, but it's over. And as we then moved into the age of Aquarius in December 21st of 2021, we then opened the door to the feminine of feeling and heart. And when masculine mind is now silenced, it becomes pure light. And the feminine of imagination is now fully realized. We become creators and manifestors of reality. And so we become co-creators with the divine. And so this is why the next wave of evolution is now before us, and the old is crumbling and falling away. And because the old paradigm was based upon the old of masculine, of old programs, we see it crumbling pretty rapidly. We see it crumbling environmentally, we see it socially, we see it financially, we see it at all levels. And part of us want to then, have some worry or some angst or some fear about that. But if we're focused upon simply honing our attention and consciousness in light activation for love and joy and peace, we're then emanating love and joy and peace, even in the midst of the things that cause travail outwardly. We observe them, we recognize it, we have great compassion for what's happening. At the same time, it doesn't really bring any anger or frustration or loneliness within us, because we are now focused upon simply creating light into light activation for the future. And so we become seeds that know we are here to create the new paradigm of masculine and feminine harmony and balance. And so this is really what the whole book, Source Dialogues, is based upon how each of us can then begin to hone and refine the self by finding inside of the body all the emotions and all the feelings of the programs that we were given growing up that keep us in fear or worry or sadness or frustration, and realize they were programs that were given to us. And as we're bringing then the light of the soul into the body, we can move through the emotion, find the part of us that wasn't loved. And as we love ourselves unconditionally, we move into the fullness of what it is to be feminine love and imagination. And through our meditation, we're bringing the mind back into silence. The two become unified within. And so then we move into light activation within form. It's somewhat of a challenging situation because so few people know how to really move in and find the emotion, the feeling within the body. They're still with the mind looking and wanting, but in fact, source, God, whatever you'd like to call it, already exists inside. And so this is why, as we then open the heart chakra and we're able to move back and to feel the void within, we actually can feel source, God, arising forth from inside out. God is not out there, source is not out there. When the doorway is open, we realize we are source, God, I am. And from the revelation of that, we then become a co-creator manifesting through the Christ field, the creative mechanism of manifestation. So a very exciting time, and I think it kind of dovetails into what Barbara Marx Hubbard was really saying about the future, and it is a future of light and joy and grace, but the old paradigm is moving away pretty quickly. Do we have any questions or thoughts about that?
So, this is a beautiful book. Thank you for that, Rita. And this is a dialogue between you and source.
Mm-hmm.
And so you ask questions and then you got your answers directly.
Yes, the woman that I met, Sandra Sneed, in 2015 it was, she was able to read my soul, and she was reading my soul, I would then ask questions back, and then we did probably 40, 50 dialogues together where she would bring information forth about my soul and about my purpose on the planet. I would then ask questions about that. I would take it into my meditation experience and work with it and refine it, and then open the doorways within me so that I actually became the light activation of it. And then I would ask more questions about the feelings of that, what was happening within my body, and how to then further refine the process, because it's such an extensive thing to really bring it into light activation within the form. All of the physical cells within the body, both at the level of the physical, the emotional, and the mental, have to move into a higher frequency, which I'm sure we all know. But at the same time, to be able to do that with such a powerful energy as the Christ field, it can be somewhat debilitating to the body if we're not keeping ourselves in a very high conscious state, which is why my meditation practice is so strong, you see.
Thank you for that, Gary. And, we always say we're going from one dimension, we're in the third dimension, we're in the fourth dimension, we can go up to 12 dimensions.
Right.
How does the Christ field, I'm not sure, does it discuss dimensions? Does Source think of dimensions or describe that?
Well, of course, we call dimension one source, the void, all that is. And as it asked the question, what am I? Then there was two. So then there was two dimensions. And then the two dimensions then created the three dimension, which is form. And there was the fourth dimension of time, space. And then there was the fifth dimension of the angelic and those creator beings who then created life. And then the sixth of then the Christ field within form. And so as we then move into light activation, we're moving into the fifth and the sixth dimension within form. It's not leaving the body, you see. We're bringing all that we are as source, God, into form, so that source, or if you will call it God, becomes alive and living within form for the first time in creation. And so source God has been somewhat outside of creation as consciousness, working upon physicality in order to develop it, in order to refine it, in order to grow it in consciousness. And then about, let's say 200,000 years ago, ape man began to be able to, through the brain, cognize self-awareness. And as that happened, then source or consciousness could actually begin to be able to get in form for the first time. And so since then, it has been then moving ever deeper through reincarnation and through lessons learned and through understanding about who we are on the planet, good, bad, light, dark, emotion, feeling. It continues to refine consciousness and refine the body, so more of the soul can keep entering deeper and deeper into the form. And because the soul is spirit, it is, if you will, God or source, it finally becomes informed, which is then the Christ field. And now God walks on earth for the first time. And as God walks on earth for the first time, we then become co-creators of life. We're no longer simply through our own limited knowing, we become actually part of the mind of Source God, able to look back into the void and illuminate that which we are, Source God, and bring that which is the next wave of evolution into its next possibility. And so this is the great, you see, jump in evolution that we're taking. And that's why the old paradigm you see is crumbling so rapidly, because it doesn't vibrate to this new frequency at all, you see.
Well, it's been said that there have been 5, 6 different extinctions. Are those
Yes.
just times that we didn't make the leap? I know Barbara Marx Hubbard always talked about I'm waiting for the leap, in humanity.
Right, right. Well, it's not so much an instantaneous leap, it's more a time, time-driven leap. And it really is the cycle of the precessions of the equinoxes. So as our solar system moves in its revolution around the Milky Way, it takes 26,200 years. And every 2,000 years, we go into a new sign, about 2,200 years. And as we do that, there's another frequency of energy coming from that particular vibration of the star systems to Earth. And so we moved out of Pisces, which is masculine control and old programs, into Aquarius, the pouring out of the living waters upon the Earth. And so we're now moving into a place of more light activation as we simply move in a procession of the equinoxes. And so as that happens, 12,200 years ago, there was a civilization called Atlantis. And so we were at the very height of this procession of the equinoxes, but then we began to be somewhat involved in ego and manipulation in Atlantis, and then it crumbled, and then we began the descent into darkness, which finally reached its nadir, or the bottom, at the end of the Piscean age, and now we begin another procession of 12,200 years out. It's just like a wave cycle. But it's not just a wave cycle, you see, it's just like DNA. It's always cycling and moving up as consciousness expands in waves, moving ever higher and higher towards oneness with Source.
So that sounds like it's the yugas.
Yes, the yugas are part of that. The yugas are a much longer cycle that. But you see, whenever there has been an extinction event on the planet, a cycle of evolution of Mother Earth was over. She is an evolving being. She is a Christ field. The sun is a Christ field. A Christ field is simply a field that is creating manifestation and an evolution of consciousness within itself, in union with the divine, mind you, but of its own revelation. And so Earth being a Christ field, it goes through its stages in consciousness as well. And about 5,000 mass extinctions have happened because Earth is cycled through those mass extinction events. But every time that happened, you see, life evolved in ever more greater, glorious, magnificent way, because that which adapted to the environment, that's which it adapted to that was going on outside, created new cellular movement, and life became more glorious, beautiful, and evolved, you see. But we're reaching the point now with this extinction event somewhat that we're going through. Yes, the things are falling away that are of the old paradigm, but with imagination and the focusing of mind, we can imagine and feel the fullness of Source arising from inside out. And so we began to evolve inside out. The whole evolution of the planet has been evolving through adapting to the environment. But now as we focus the mind and imagine and feel, when we imagine something within, it begins to, through epigenetics, create an evolution from within. And so we can now evolve from inside out rather than adapting to the environment. Because so few people really know this, this is why there are probably so many people that are going to fall away within this somewhat extinction event. And those who are moving into the new paradigm are going to evolve from inside out. They become conscious creators with source. And so it's a very exciting time, but in one way it looks like a tragic time. But it's just the evolution and the cycles of Mother Earth evolving and unfolding. So there's really nothing to worry about if you are moving into light activation. But if you're carrying within the body sadness and grief and frustration and anger, and you look at the Capitol riots and you dislike it and despise it, that's simply a reflection of something inside that still has that emotion. And so because it's vibrating within, you then won't be moving into light activation into the new. And so all of this that is happening in the world is stimulating people's emotions and their angst to find as signposts out there what is not yet in fulfillment within me that is keeping me from moving into light activation, that I become the creator with my imagination and evolve my being with Mother Earth into the new paradigm, you see. So in one way, everything is perfect, is simply trying to drive people into awareness. But as we well know, so many people, they're not moving into awareness. They're stuck on their small screens. They're stuck in their money, their power, their glamour. And so we have compassion, but it is falling away very, very rapidly. And Mother Earth is going to go through a great crisis for sure. But again, if we are moving into light activation and through our imagination, creating our environment from within, we then move to a place of peace and harmony and joy in the midst of destructuring, you see.
Well, that, you explained very beautifully. And people have asked me, well, how are you dealing with COVID and all these negative things going on? And I just always went back to what Barbara said and said, breakdown before breakthrough. And our crisis is a birth. And so that sounds very much aligned with maybe shorthand for what you just explained in much more detail. But
there's really nothing out there that can bother us if we are really fully in love with self. If we have found the emotions of our programming from childhood, because it's from conception to 7 years of age, when the child lives at feeling, not thinking, just feeling. And so whatever's going on within the family unit with mother, father, culture, that's impregnated to us and causes emotion from conception to 7. And very few people are reaching down and then finding that emotion at that early age. And so they keep then meeting emotions out there of sadness or loneliness or anger at something that's happening, but it's but reflecting something that's still within. So everything that is happening is perfect. It doesn't necessarily look nice, mind you, but it's in perfection. And it's driving people to awake if they can.
Yeah, I've had a few brick walls I've run into that have changed my direction.
I have 1,000 of them going through my transformation, thousands.
Right. We do have a question that came over from the Facebook, and Pat asks, Pat Field asks, can you please link the tetrahedral structure you spoke of to the teachings of Buckminster Fuller and his synergistic geometry? I'm reading about Bucky's metaphysical tricks right now. Quite fascinating.
Well, of course, because the star tetrahedron, it's the perfect balance of masculine power and feminine love and feeling. It actually creates a structure, a light activation structure of consciousness and light around, in, and through us. And so that is the star tetrahedron, which Buckminster Fuller was beginning to cognized, and he found that then the structure of his geometric dome, because it was based upon the star tetrahedron, it had tremendous strength to it, incomparable strength to it. But you see, the beauty of it is when the star tetrahedron turns, so this is the image of the star tetrahedron, but it's also at its most minute, almost quantum level, is the structure of DNA. So as this turns, it then, as it spirals up, it then structures DNA within the body. And so all life is based upon the structure of the star tetrahedron. It is the prism of the Christ principle of manifestation. And so all life is based upon the star tetrahedron. And so Buckminster Fuller, cognizing that, knew that there was something magnificent happening. And it would be interesting to see if he was able then to bring it to a fruition of really it's about a human being becoming the star tetrahedron. So good question.
Very good. I hope that answers her question or her comment. Thank you for that. And everyone is welcome to jump in here. I don't mean to be dominating the conversation here. I'm going to butt out here for a while, Rita, and allow others to have a chance.
I want to bring in the fact that in the book, there is a star tetrahedron crop circle that is Gary has incorporated in the book, and it showed up in Wiltshire, England on July 18th in 2017. And this image is very, very striking because the crop circle was 450 feet in diameter, and it appeared in a field where the stalks of grain were bent but not broken. And Gary's showing that right now on the screen. On the outer edge of the circle, you won't be able to see this on your screens, but when you get the book, you'll see there's a shadow of a human being that's standing at the edge of this crop circle. And it's quite mind-blowing.
Right. I mean, how amazing that a vibration, it's been a common, somewhat you might say cognized, that crop circles are really vibrations coming from inside of Earth outward. That is literally the energy of Mother as she is then vibrating and moving to this new evolutionary wave that she is then creating these vibrations, and they become crop circles. It's not some aliens or some entities out there. It's simply the vibration possibly of Mother as Earth. And so here Mother Earth probably is then cognizing this really three-dimensional star tetrahedron of massive size and quality. And it's just showing us once again that it is part of the creative principle of all life. When we look at the in the womb and the gestation, I think it's at the sixth week. At the 6th week, the blastocyst looks like a star tetrahedron. And so all life you see is based upon the dimensions and the geometry of the star tetrahedron. So it's a very amazing thing that we can realize that when it is really finally formulated around us, and we are then able to work with this field of consciousness and light, that to see the most magnificent thing, it opens this doorway in the very center of you, back into the void, from out of which you originally emerged as source to begin creation. So as it opens the doorway within and you're able to view yourself back in the void, you see yourself as God, becoming that which you are, God within form, and you are simply becoming co-creator. This is the magnificence, you see, of the star tetrahedron and the Christ principle.
Thank you, Gary. We have a question from Kathy, who's in the audience, and she would love to know more about the origin of the angelic realm and what their role is here.
So out of the origination of the Christ field, when that which is source asked the question, what am I? And the Christ field emerged and creation began, from out of it, there were then 7 rays of energy that were emitting out, which is the rays of the rainbow. And each one of those rays then became a very highly evolved consciousness that we call the archangelic kingdom. And from the archangelic kingdom, which is again, literally billions upon billions of years ago in evolution, it's from these very magnificent first rays of energy that they then began to create streams of light from them that each of us individually could then begin to incarnate upon. So you might say that if you can imagine an archangelic energy from the origin is then a stream of living light. It could be the color blue. And in this stream of living light, there are literally billions of atoms, billions of molecules. Well, you are a molecule from the origination of an archangelic being out of the Christ field. Another person is from the origin of an archangelic being from out of the Christ field. And so we're simply like, if you will, branches on a tree. And so the archangel is then the tree, and from it branches just in multitudes begin to evolve from it. Each of us has a creation experience from one of these archangelic beings. So that's why we talk about the 7 rays of color, the 7 rays of initiation, the 7 rays of manifestation, the 7 chakras. And so it's all part of the emanation of the origin from the origination of the Christ field.
Thank you for that.
Mhm.
That's very filling. Fills me up.
Yeah, it's quite beautiful to realize, you see, we live in this stream of living light, 24/7. You've always lived within it. You've always existed within it. It's just your consciousness and your perceptions. It then makes you believe that you're out of the stream. And so your perceptions then are the individualized ego that then, if you will, moves through time, space, and it finds its difficulties, its issues, its problems. But when you begin to move into spiritual activation, you move back into that living stream, and you realize, just like one living river flowing to the ocean, we're all part of this one consciousness of source with our unique water droplet of identity.
Thank you. Well, it's about 10 to the hour, and we promised folks that you would give us an experience of meditation so we could go into a very, very quiet space and bring this material that you've been providing us into this being. So does that seem appropriate?
Yeah, it sounds wonderful. Now, the importance of this particular meditation, it's about using the principle of masculine, which is simply the focusing of light, which is the third eye. And so as we bring our attention between the eyebrows and we draw a line straight back, we're in the area of the pineal gland, which we call the seat of the soul. And so it is the seat of the Christ light. And as we ignite this light, which is masculine, we bring it down to the heart, the feminine of feeling. We then imagine and feel a living spring arising forth from inside out. Source God arising forth from inside out. So you're no longer looking for God. You're no longer looking for source. You're no longer looking for something. You have the realization, I am the living light. And so this is where the word I am came from. I already am the living light. I am at one with source. And so as we do this meditation, we'll simply close our eyes and bring attention between the eyebrows. Hold it there for a minute as we imagine light. Imagination is the key. We imagine light coming down to the heart, and we then feel the doorway open within the heart and this living spring of source arising forth. Very simple meditation. So let's simply close the eyes and feel the body relaxing. We could be aware of our breath. And as we observe the breath, inhale and exhale, we can feel the body relaxing, letting go. Slowly bringing our attention between the eyebrows. Imagining we could draw a line straight back. And within the approximate center point of the head, we imagine the light of the soul, divine and sacred light. Light filling the mind, filling the brain. We can gently bring the light to the heart chakra at the sternum. And within the very center of the chest, the heart chakra, a doorway opens. It opens into source, infinite oneness. And we imagine and feel a living spring of golden sunlight and peace flowing up and out. And with each in-breath, we can let it rest upon the living spring. And as we're breathing in, it summons the living spring from inside out. And with a gentle exhale, we observe and feel sunlight and peace, radiant all around us. A living spring of golden sunlight and peace. The spring eternal, infinite source. Thus you may say, God I am. I am the light. And with each slow, deep inhalation, we are summoning and calling the living spring. From out of the open doorway within the heart. And like the physical sun, light eternal shining, healing and renewing every cell and tissue in the body. Shining out into the world, bringing peace, comfort, and joy. Simply allowing the light of the mind to rest at the open doorway within the heart. Allowing the golden spring eternal as it flows forth from you effortlessly. It pre-creates peace, prosperity, and joy, love and grace. I am the living light. And every cell in the body is being infused and activated with light. Creator being I am. Summoning the living spring from the open doorway I am. To bring light I am. As a gift to all creation I am. One source, one light. One living spring eternal. Through all creation. All else is illusion and separation. Transpiring to invite you back to be the eternal spring I am. This is the Christ field, source arising from within. Mind imagining and illuminating choices of creation. And the eternal spring bringing manifestation. Simplicity and peace. As you rest within the living spring I am. Throughout the entire day, at the business, walking, whatever you're doing, the eternal spring can flow from the open doorway, pre-creating reality, the emanation of source oneness. God I am. And then very easily, still allowing the eternal spring to flow, creating light activation within and all around, pre-creating life before you. Allowing yourself to slowly come back more and more into the moment. Into the now. And when it's comfortable, to slowly open the eyes. Thank you, Rita. That was a wonderful opportunity.
Thank you, Gary.
It's so effortless to simply brings one attention to the heart chakra. It's what we call in India, in the Sanskrit cosmology, the jewel in the lotus. And when the jewel in the lotus, because self-love has been established, the living spring eternal simply begins to arise forth from within. And as it flows forth, it simply pre-creates life and joy before us. We observe the things that are going on in the world with compassion. We understand the difficulties, the tragedy. It doesn't bother us. It's simply an observation of life unfolding and revealing possibilities, but it's the compassion and love flowing from the heart that changes it automatically by vibration rather than wanting or needing it to be different. Wanting and needing is a form of manipulation. Whereas the frequency of the living light, it automatically moves in and through all creation, ignites what is the source of all creation, the oneness of God I am, and then the living light begins to vibrate up and out. So it becomes a very effortless and dynamic way, you see, to bring healing to the planet.
Beautiful. I felt held in this golden bubble. Absolutely. It's quite warm in here now.
Yeah. The beautiful thing about it, I often get the questions in my counseling, should I put a bubble of protection around me? But a bubble of protection, you see, it simply then is trying to keep things away from you that are trying to come in and give you some understanding about who and what I am. And so if there's some emotion out there and you're trying to block it, it's simply trying to vibrate something within that has emotion. And if you can not react to the emotion, but simply feel it, and then go within and bring love to the self, then that no longer bothers you and you're no longer attracting it to you. And so we then begin to develop the living spring flowing from us, and there's no longer protection. There's simply the transmutation of all consciousness before us, you see.
Thank you. And Noelle, do we want to invite folks in to ask questions?
Absolutely. I'm going to put it in gallery view, and I've changed it so that you can turn on your video and unmute yourself and join this conversation, because I think this is a most unique opportunity to be able to ask some very deep questions. And so I do know there is a few folks that had to jump off. Pat Field, who was on earlier, who asked that question about Buckminster Fuller on Facebook, she appreciated your answer. And she said she has to sign off, but she thanks you and says, excellent talk. She'll check it again. She'll pick it up on our replays. And she's a author of memoir about obsession with Bucky's messages about humanity's future, and also very inspired by Barbara Marx Hubbard. So as I know a lot of folks are here.
Two luminaries for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, so I don't know, Bob, do you want to ask people to go ahead and turn on their videos?
Sure.
There we go.
I can. Mhm.
Kathy, do you have a, how do, I'm still about this different dimensions and different realities,
Mhm.
multiple, we're multi-dimensional beings. So how are we operating in all these other places? And, people that say that they, are from Arcturus or Lyra or other places. How do those ideas flow into this, Gary?
That's a good question. Well, when we talked in the origination about the archangelic energy as a living stream, and within it, there are literally billions of molecules that go into manifestation as fields of consciousness. Some of them moved into human dimensionality. Some of them moved into other dimensions like Arcturus, like the Pleiades, like the star system Sirius. And so they evolved in different ways with unique abilities and capabilities, but it's simply consciousness that's taking different forms. And so a consciousness that once was within Arcturus could then choose to come and then embody within a human form. And so that's part of their spectrum of wisdom, of knowledge. And so, yes, there are many different individuals throughout many star systems who have come and now they are embodied as human life wave, but it's simply gathering information across the cosmos, you see.
Okay. And people who have, I'm just thinking of Kathy and Sean here, who do a lot with IANS, the International Association Near-Death Experiences. What are they experiencing when they have a near-death experience, do you think?
Well, usually they go back to the realm of the soul, which is the aspect of you that is simply taking a piece of itself. And as mother and father create a physical form, the soul then drops that piece down in through time, space, and then it's born within a human physical body. And if we then are able to move into creational fullness within, day by day, week by week, year by year, the soul can finally become fully informed. And so this is light now living within form. But when someone has not yet moved to that place of full light activation and the physical body goes through a near-death experience, they go back to the light of the soul, the origination of who and what they are, and they might receive some information, they might receive some understanding, they feel a profound feeling of usually love and unity with source and oneness. But it's simply the being that they are, you see, that is once again helping them understand who and what they are. And if the soul through them is making a choice to come back, they come back into life. If not, they simply exit the physical body and go back into the soul and prepare for another incarnation, you see. That's why death is really not such a tragedy. It's simply if you have a nice auto and it gets banged up, you might go buy a new auto. Well, you don't grieve over the old auto and you don't try and ask your friends to come and grieve about the old auto. You simply get a new auto. And you see, so there's going to be a whole lot of new information coming forth about what is physical life and how do we then begin to understand that the death experience is really nothing. And in fact, through light activation, you see, and the soul is fully informed, we can be in the body or out of the body as we choose, you see. This is what great masters are able to do. They can be in the form or they can be out of the form, because it's really then the soul and the higher mind they are that is imagining the body. You are but the imagination of the higher mind, the being you are. And that has been imagining you. It is imagined into the denseness of light, the fullness of the body that you call yourself. So as we activate the higher mind and become one and unified with it, we could dissolve the physical form and simply reactivate a physical form. We could move into another physical place and then reactivate the physical form again, because it's simply the mind through imagination creating light to be dense. That's all that life is. It's already light. Everything is light. A stone is light. A flower is light. It's just at different frequencies because it's all source God and light it is. But as you then begin to understand that you are light, you can then be the master of light and be informed or out of form. So pretty exciting times.
That's very interesting, Gary. That reminds me of my friend, Father Tiso, who he's a Roman Catholic priest, and he did a study on the rainbow body of the Buddhist manifestation.
Yes.
And so that it makes absolute sense. And
Sure.
it makes me curious to go back and look at Father Tiso's book again.
Yeah, of course, down through history, there have been many, many individuals who have mastered the Christ field. It's just that we revere the one 2,000 years ago because it was so, if you will, prominent within the culture at that particular time. But Krishna, you see in India, there's once again the word Krishna, Christ, the Christ field. And so even from out of original nation in Atlantis, there were many masters. So it's happened often on the planet. It's just now is a time where, as the master Yeshua Jesus said, now the Christ is coming again. But it's through you and I, you see, we are moving into light activation. We're now creating the soul to be fully informed and moving into a fifth dimensional frequency within a three-dimensional body. And so we become then human divine species. This is the evolution that's happening. We're moving to human divine species. Just as we once moved from ape to chimpanzee, from chimpanzee to then Neanderthal man, we're now moving into the next wave of human evolution. And that which does not vibrate and can imagine itself into that wave is then quietly falling away, you see.
I can
Sean
hear
had a
Barbara.
question. Go ahead, Rita.
I just wanted to say I can hear Barbara cheering.
Thank you.
Indeed.
Well, I really feel her very much with us, quite frankly, that she's this beautiful golden frequency that's just interwoven throughout all of this that's taking place tonight. She didn't go anywhere, of course.
It's true.
Oh, Barbara's
It's true.
always with us.
It's true.
That's for sure. Yeah, 100%.
Sean, he has a question that he typed in.
Yeah, go ahead,
Go
Sean.
ahead, Sean.
I suspect I know what you'll probably say, but I'm curious. So what do you think about after death communication with somebody who has already been reincarnated into another life in another body, maybe in another dimension or whatever? How would you say that works?
Didn't quite get the question.
So reincarnate. So after death communication, so connecting with somebody
the
who
soul.
has passed
Okay.
on, but they've already been reincarnated
Okay,
into another life,
right,
possibly another
Right.
world, another dimension.
right.
How does that work?
Well, time-space is an illusion. You see, unfortunately, it's hard for the mind to really cognize, but all time is happening simultaneous. It's kind of like when you go to the movie. In the olden days, they had the canister of film, and you had to then watch the film frame by frame in order to have an understanding of beginning, middle, and end. But once you saw the movie, you could simply, if you will, cognize it. You could grok the whole thing instantly. Well, if you will, Source has simply created a movie of eternity, but we who are in time, space, within dimensions, we only get to play frame by frame within it. And so simultaneously, you see, your soul is everywhere present throughout all creation and all of your experiences. And as you then begin to fully cognize that, you find within your DNA, and this is part of the wonderful teaching in the book, that within your DNA, as you move to full light activation, you have all of the memory of what it was to be an amoeba and fully evolve in and through your genome to become a human divine being. All that information is there, you see. Good question, my friend. Are you really in Hawaii?
Yeah.
I really am. Can I
Okay.
ask one more question? What do you think of A Course in Miracles?
I love the Course in Miracles. I think it's a very profound teaching. The only thing that I have a little bit of, I guess something with is that it doesn't bring it into the feeling nature that much. It keeps it more within the mind realm of knowing and profound eternal wisdom. But I've been doing aura readings for 30, 40 years. And I've read some of the most evolved people on the planet, but very few of them have light below the diaphragm. And so they can be the most illuminated and know and speak with clarity and be great teachers, bravo. But to be fully embodied with light, it's very, very difficult. And so the Course in Miracles, it's the understanding of mind activation, but it doesn't really bring it into feeling embodiment. It talks about that, but it doesn't give the tools or the creative experience to do that, you see.
Well, Gary, would you say that your book, your teachings, does that?
Yes, yes. It takes you from the beginning of clearing emotion up to enlightenment, and then from enlightenment to light activation within the body. So ascension within form, not ascending out, but light activation you see within.
Mm-hmm.
And the book, I don't know if you have a chance to start to go through it, but it is so deep and profound. I mean, I'm just quite amazed at it, not because it's mine, but because of the information that came through that I have, of course, studied it for, I don't know, the last 8-10 years. I read it probably 16 to 20 times as I was editing it, and then began to create the footnotes for it. But more importantly, you see, as I was going through the information, I always had to bring it to my body and then make it real within form, make it real within form. And so I've watched myself and my consciousness change dramatically over the last 5 years. I know we all have at many, many levels, but this is a whole nother level of light activation and peace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
And that's
go ahead, Rita.
That's one point I really appreciate about the book are the footnotes, because because of Gary's depth and breadth of studying for so many years, he brings very practically into the footnotes information that connects the dots.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's such a phenomenal piece that with the edification of the footnotes, it then gives you an entry point into how can I really understand and bring this into the deep knowledge within me, you see. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kathy.
I have a question for you, Gary, about quantum physics.
Mm-hmm.
And we're hopefully going from a Newtonian mindset to more of a quantum mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And from what how does quantum physics or the current quantum physics formulas, how does that fit into your soul structure?
Well, it's moving ever closer to understanding that even quantum physics is simply consciousness.
Right.
There's only mind. And mind at the very beginning of creation, and its very beginning of rudimentary light activation, created the first quantum movement of light. Light then became and formed as molecules. Molecules then finally began to coalesce into form, but it's all light. And so even quantum physics is somewhat of an illusion. It's seeking to bring us to an understanding through the mind and through science of spirituality, and they will meet. But one can simply go to light activation within and know all creation from inside out.
Right.
Because you are the creator, you are God, you see, you already are source. And so this is the beauty of going beyond even any thinking at all to simply using the mind as a tool of focusing light, imagining and feeling, opening the doorway within, seeing and feeling coming into light activation. And thus we begin to become creators. And so we then become simply light activation into form. Again, this is what Yeshua, Jesus, was able to do. It's what all great masters were able to do. They're simply able to densify light because they could imagine what they want, hold it with such focus, clarity, and imagine it with such precision, light began to activate into form. It's all just light. There's only light in all creation, you see.
So we've got another quick question then.
Mhm.
Where does sound come in? Because
Where
in
does
the
what?
Bible, sound, because
sound.
God said, let there be light. So
Right.
some people say that sound came first.
Sound did come first. So if you will, in the Bible, in the beginning, it said there was the word. And the word we see was the sound of Om. And AUM, which is from in India, we call it the sound of creation. It was then beginning to be a vibration like a snake, a wave. And as those waves of sound began to move and interface throughout all creation, just like waves upon the ocean, moving and dancing, they finally then created light. And so sound then created light, you see.
Oh, that's wonderful. I've
Yeah,
never heard
yeah.
that. Okay, and
So sound, you see, it's just all, and of course, everything is an amplitude. You are sound, I am sound. Everything is a sound vibration, and a sound vibration is a wave. But in the beginning of creation, when the ultimate sound first came forth, then all these waves beginning to move in and through each other, it then finally created light. And so sound created light, light created consciousness, consciousness creates light into form, you see.
perfect.
Well,
Good question.
I have a quick question.
We
Please.
could do
All
this
the,
for
all the
hours.
questions are quick. The answers, wow.
Yeah, well, the answers are, let me see if I get this.
I know, it's like
Yes.
Gary had to work, it made me feel good that Gary had to work on his footnotes for a while.
Yeah.
We're like,
We
you know,
have to get this book. Oh my gosh.
yeah. Okay, so next week our speaker is a wonderful man, and his topic is what happened before the Big Bang?
Right.
What answer do you have for that, Gary?
What says ye?
Well, it was the void, and then the void, which is simply through eternal, everywhere creation, infinite, it simply finally asked the question, what am I?
What
And
am
that
I?
moment there was light, and the light was then simply the bang of creation. The Christ field began. So simply consciousness now knew itself. That's the Big Bang.
Wow, that's okay. Final question here. We need to wrap up. I'm so grateful for this time. But Gary, tell us how you work with people, how people can work with you.
Well, one of the main things, of course, I do is soul readings, where I sit and with an individual, either personally or online, and I look at the energy field within and through, how it relates to them physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, what their soul is seeking to reveal within this incarnation, what are the lessons they're looking to balance and align themselves with, and how they can continue to move into light activation within. So that's one of my main counseling sessions. And then I also do a lot of, before COVID, I traveled a lot and did workshops and teaching. I had a wonderful healing center in Sedona for many years.
Wow. How long does it take to do that for someone? I'm thinking like to get all that information. That's a lot.
Me to do a reading?
Yeah.
About an hour, 15 minutes.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to sign up for one of those. So what Rita, I don't know if you want to close us out with some how to contact Gary or any. Or,
Yes, I put the contact information is in the chat for
Yeah.
people,
Okay.
and I can be sure to put it in
okay.
follow up on the event on Facebook, and you did a good job announcing that.
Mhm.
But also Gary has a meditation group.
Oh.
Do you want to mention that, Gary?
Yes, every second and third Wednesday, we have an online meditation group. And if anyone has any questions or they'd like to think about joining the meditation group, I'm always open to questions. I love them. You can email me at gspring33@gmail.com. I'm always open to questions, to assisting and giving information. So I'm here.
Wow.
Information about the meditation group on your website, because we already have that in the chat.
No, it's not.
It's not.
Okay. All righty. Well, you heard it here first.
Contact him, but they could contact you at your email address.
Yes, and then,
Yes.
of course, I send out a newsletter every month, and it gives all the information about the online meditation. So,
Okay.
yeah, if you just want to sign up for the email, I'd be happy to do that also, you see.
Wonderful.
And the book is available through,
You can either email me personally. So here is the star tetrahedron and its three-dimensionality that is the emergence of the Christ field. And so you can email me and I can personally sign one and send you a book. And as I said in the information, I'm happy to give everyone a 50% discount if they'd like to order one. So
Wonderful.
my
Thank you
pleasure.
so much. Thank you so much.
Such
It's
a
been
joy, such a joy. Yeah.
wonderful. Rita, you knocked it out of the park again, bringing wonderful guests. Gary, you just blew me away. So
Well, thank you, my friend. I really had a great time. I loved all the questions. And whenever you want to interface again, please let me know.
will do. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Blessings.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha, namaste.
Peace and blessings.